The US and China are spiraling into more hostility in terms of their relationship. And so, as an investor in Chinese equities, this is not welcome news. And so, that's what I'm going to cover in this video. So, guys, as you smash that like button, let me run that intro. What's up, guys, and welcome back to the channel. Now, a couple of months ago, we started having open conversations between the US and China. We saw things going in the right direction. Then, of course, the balloon gate thing happened. And now, it looks like the relationship is spiraling in the other direction. And so the Wall Street Journal covered it. And I do want to cover it on this channel just to show you what has transpired. And so you can see here, the Wall Street Journal pretty much nailed it. So after tiptoeing toward a rapprochement, which happened, late last year, any fence mending right now has been postponed. And just for some of you guys that may not remember, recall, guys, that the leaders actually met and they agreed to resume talks on major global priorities and acknowledged areas of deep disagreement. And this was just as early as November of 2022. And so the leaders met, and then they said that their sort of like teams were going to meet at separate dates to come together and find solutions. And so it's just very interesting how we've gone backwards now. And you guys know exactly why this happened. There was that balloon incident which essentially crushed any expectations from the Biden and President Xi Jinping summit. Now both sides are navigating heated political pressure at home and just trying to avoid as much of an escalation of tensions as possible. And so now that you're caught up, this is the part that gets a little bit scary. So China's Xi Jinping actually took an aim at the US directly. And so essentially what he said is that Western countries led by the US have implemented all-around containment, encirclement, and suppression against us being China, bringing unprecedentedly severe challenges to our country's development. Mr. Xi Jinping was quoted by state media as saying on Monday of this past week. And so, this is challenging because, they're painting themselves as the victim, but, this is largely in line with what China's leaders have done previously. They always tend to paint themselves as a victim. I mean, there is political power in doing so. And so is this largely a shot against the US to escalate tensions, or is this just a political move to increase or maintain power at home? I think it's the latter. I don't think that President Xi Jinping is really trying to sort of like nudge the US into more conflict. Now, China's foreign minister came out and said that the ties with the US is risking going off the rails. And so Qin Gang, I apologize if I pronounced that wrong, guys, came out with a warning that unless the U.S. changes course, there will surely be conflict and confrontation. So that's something that you don't want to hear. And then the U.S. came out and said that there's nothing about our approach to this most consequential of bilateral relationships that should lead anybody to think that we want conflict. And that was said by John Kirby, who's a National Security Council coordinator of strategic communications for the White House. So essentially, the U.S. is saying that, look, we don't want conflict, and there's nothing to suggest that we do want conflict. And so I'm hoping that they continue on this line. I don't think any of this is an escalation. I think a lot of this still is media FUD. And so as far as I'm concerned, there's no sort of like reason why I would be looking to sell my Chinese or Alibaba investments at all. But an interesting point to note is that after the balloon incident, Anthony Blinken actually postponed his visit to Beijing. And I thought, and both sides also think that it's a critical step towards reopening communication channels. And so instead, what ended up happening is that President Xi's foreign envoy Wang Yi toured Europe and badmouthed the U.S. at each stop, allegedly. I don't know exactly what he said. And so Mr. Blinken also publicly warned Beijing not to fan the Ukraine conflict, saying that the U.S. had intelligence China was considering providing Russia with lethal aid such as drones and armaments. And so, much of the rhetoric from both governments is designed for their domestic audiences. And so if this is just saber rattling for domestic political points, both sides need to be careful. And because this is just my opinion, but I think things can escalate quickly. We need to be friends. And so I think there is some good news here. While I do believe that it was a bit of a setback that Blinken didn't get to go to Beijing, it looks like, he's looking to reschedule as soon as the conditions allow. And so both governments have shared aspirations to prevent conflict and stabilize ties. And so, once again, I think that this is more media FUD, fanning the flames on the conflict between the US and China. I don't think necessarily that things are as bad as what's being reported in the media, but we'll see how this plays plays out. But once again, I don't see any cause for alarm with all of the news that has come out recently about the China and US relations. Now, the other thing that you guys got to be aware of is China recently reopened and the economy is starting to surge. And so if you haven't seen that video where I start talking about that, you can get to it right here.